Hello, everyone, and welcome to LDM Radio Sports Talk, the show that talks about sports and other topics relatable to sports fans. Joining me this week is Scott Blander from Pennsylvania.
Greetings all. How you doing, Fonz?
How you, Mr. Blander? All
Good
right.
to meet
So,
you.
unfortunately, we weren't on last week, so we have some football catching up to do. So there were four. So we have four teams going into I guess pre-Super Sunday. Um, First off, we're going to start with how they got here and talk about the matchup. So first, we're going to go through the 49ers. The 49ers, they beat the number one offense in the Dallas Cowboys 2 weeks ago, and then they beat the number one seed in Lambeau Field for a team that had the week off beforehand, and the Green Bay Packers. So tell me about the 49ers and how impressive. Well, I'm sure you were happy with the Cowboy win, but what do you think of this 49er team?
Yeah, definitely happy about the Cowboys. That was a phenomenal day 2 weeks ago. Cowboys and Eagles knocked out in one day. Spectacular. One of the days I could possibly hope for with the Giants not being there. Yeah, the Niners are impressive, and I don't think it comes as that much of a shock. I mean, they were only 10-7 in the regular season, but they got healthy down the stretch and at the right time. So they were a lot better than a 10-7 team would indicate. And I think Garoppolo is really starting to come into his own. He was very good a couple of years ago, and then I know he had some injuries. And I for one, I don't know if the general consensus is he really the guy, but he's getting a lot better. I wouldn't put him in the elite category yet, but the Niners defense is amazing. They got the great tight end in Kittle. It really shouldn't be a surprise. I think nobody really gave him much credit going into that Dallas game, and then of course facing the number one seed Packers, and those January Lambeau conditions. But they, I don't really see them as much of a surprise. As soon as they started to get most of their guys back, specifically the defense, they definitely deserve to be here in the Final Four. They're a very enjoyable team. Definitely enjoyable. Really, unless you're a fan of a rival team or a fan of the Packers or the Cowboys, they're really one of those teams that you can't really hate. So no, they're definitely one of the feel good stories of this playoffs, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to say they're not the most feel-goody story. I think that's going to come a little bit later on with the lovable loser Cincinnati Bengals. But, the 49ers, they were strong in the rushing categories in the regular season, seventh overall in the NFL. And then their defense, which was very impressive in these, probably definitely the most impressive aspect of their playoff run thus far. They were the third overall defense, sixth against the pass, seventh against the rush. The most consistent defense by far left in this playoff season of the four teams. I think Garoppolo seems to be embracing the game manager aspect of it. He's not exactly winning games, but he's not exactly losing them either. And, I'm going to say that, they have a puncher's chance. I don't know if they're going to overtake the next team we're going to talk about. But so far, so good. They've definitely impressed in this playoff season, and they've turned it on at the right time. I think they've might have had the most turbulent seasons as far as the four remaining teams, and right now they are the hottest team going. And it'd be very interesting to see how they fare against their next opponent, which leads us to the Los Angeles Rams. Los Angeles Rams, they beat the familiar foe in the Arizona Cardinals, which was the rubber match of their season. It was third time they played them, and then they beat the number two offense in Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. So now they'll have the home game against the San Francisco 49ers, and this actual matchup itself is um, the third matchup this season between these two teams as their division rivals. So there'll be no surprises going on. And the Rams were the eighth overall. They were eighth overall in points scored, and they had the number five passing attack. So you're gonna have the number five passing attack, and I'd say maybe the second best passing attack in the teams remaining against the third ranked defense. So, what do you think of the Rams and what they've been able to accomplish so far?
Well, first of all, that was just all four games. All four games were just incredible. Very rare that you get every playoff game in a weekend was just incredible. And this was probably number two out of the four. And again, the other two were no slouches either. But this was a tale of two games. It was 20-3 at the half, 27. They tacked on another one, and everybody mid game was saying, okay, is Brady going to hang him up? And then all of a sudden it's 27-27, and it's just Brady being Brady. And then good for Stafford. The Rams, I mean, I mentioned feel good, and you said, yeah, the Bengals are probably the number one feel, but there's a bunch of feel good stories, and this is another one because we talked a few months ago about Matthew Stafford, about finally seeing what he can do when he's not under treatment anymore, and he is showing exactly that. The Buccaneers came back, tied that game, and everybody's thinking, okay, it was Brady. Of course, there did go Brady. However, Stafford had enough time to engineer a phenomenal drive toward the end there to give them the win. So the Rams are another team that they've been here before. We've seen successful Rams teams, of course, but I'm happy for Matthew Stafford. I really am, because he is, I believe, he is one of the more elite quarterbacks in the league. And he's finally getting a chance to show what he can do on a Super Bowl caliber team. And of course, anytime, no matter how old he is, anytime you beat Tom Brady in the playoffs, it's quite an accomplishment. Even at this age, he showed it's just as difficult now at his age than it was 15 years ago. So, yeah, I think the Rams, that's another great story. And you should have a very interesting matchup. I think you've got a very powerful offense against a very powerful defense. Something's got to give. If I were a betting man, I would have to go with the Rams. But again, the Niners, two very tough road wins. So you cannot count them out of anything.
Yeah, the 49ers are basically playing with house money at this point. But the feel good story, Los Angeles Rams. I think I've said it in the show previously. Matthew Stafford is probably the most underrated of the elite quarterbacks out there. You don't really hear his name in the elite category, but when you look at his number, unfortunately because he was playing for the Lions for so long. But I mean, if you look at his numbers and his production and what he's been able to accomplish in his career, if he was anywhere else, they would be saying that he's elite already. But I think now is his time to shine. I think now is when he jumps into the elite category for real. And if he can take down this 49er team and end up making it to the Super Bowl, that would cement his elite status. So I think that's something to look out for there. I'm gonna say that the Rams, the star-studded Rams, that they made the not your classic deadline deals as far as football is concerned. That's more, when it comes to hockey and baseball and even basketball, you see more like deadline deals to beef up for a playoff run. But the Rams, they acquired Von Miller. They ended up acquiring Odell Beckham. So they are all in, and I think they're going to end up being in the Super Bowl, and I think it's going to be very exciting for the city of Los Angeles as well. Who probably, I mean, I view California, but really Los Angeles in itself as probably the most bandwagon when it comes to football because they've never really they haven't had a team stick around long enough. You know, they've had teams come and go. I think they had they had the Raiders and now they have like two teams in there that came from somewhere else. You know, like they didn't really have like that homegrown fan base. You know, been there for decades, kind of. You know, everybody like I think when you look at California parties, fan parties and things like that, it's like just 17 different jerseys. It looks like a London game. It's just every team is represented and everybody kind of just has different alliances for different reasons. But I think this is where the Los Angeles football takes that next step, and they end up going into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and yeah, you hit the nail right on the head with LA. This is a city that had the Rams, lost them, had the Raiders, lost them, so they went from 0 teams to 2, and I don't understand that. I don't understand the Chargers moving at all, but yeah. So here's a city that cannot. It's proven time and time again they can't support one team. They gave them 2.
Yeah.
So, whatever the case, yeah, well, you got a nice, good for Southern California NFC Championship coming up. I think San Francisco definitely has the better, more loyal fan base. But yeah, whatever the case, should be a good game. Like I said, something's got to give whenever you have an offense. Usually I would say usually the defense wins out when you get to the playoffs in any sport, really. When you get to the playoffs and you have a high-powered offense against a high-powered defense, it's usually the defense that wins out in a playoff setting. But I think the Rams have a good enough defense to overcome that. And again, the Niners have shocked everyone to this point, but I think the Cinderella ride ends for them on Sunday. But again, that's why they play the game.
Yeah, it's all about making Garoppolo not be a game manager and making him have to beat them. That's going to be, I'm sure, the worst kept secret in the in any football fan watching this game. I mean, that's really the only solution that you would have as far as going for them defensively. Just make the guy who hasn't been super impressive, but just been impressive enough to go by. If you end up sacking him a bunch of times, you end up rattling him a bunch of times. I mean, and then if causing turnovers and things like that, that's going to be the key for the Rams for sure.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see Garoppolo as the guy you want with a minute and a half left, having in that last minute drive.
Definitely not.
In a playoff setting. I mean, nobody can do it until they do it. Eli Manning has made a career out of that. Tom Brady certainly, and we just saw this last week. Matthew Stafford proved that he can do it. So I don't know. At this point, Garoppolo is not the guy that I would want there. But if it comes down to it, he will get the opportunity to prove himself. But I think, if it does come down to that, I can see the Rams holding on. I don't know if he's the last minute clutch quarterback. I think that's probably his Achilles heel if I had to pick one. I don't see him being the under pressure, under stress kind of playoff game-winning drive quarterback. But again, nobody is until they are, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think just for Garoppolo himself, I mean, I don't even think the 49ers think that he's the actual guy to do that too, because then they wouldn't have drafted the quarterback last year so high up in the draft. So basically, the heir apparent's already on the team, learning from all of these experiences. Garoppolo's basically auditioning for his next gig. Whether he's going to be a starter somewhere or just have to, be like a high end backup or however that ends up unfolding. A lot of what the answers to that question will happen with his performance in the playoffs. So it's going to be a big game for him to prove a lot of doubters wrong. And then if he proves the doubters right, then the Rams are walking into the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
All right. So Now we're gonna go to the AFC. So we're gonna start soft with the I'd say the most lovable loser bunch as far as a long time franchising not so classically great team. Cincinnati Bengals. They ended up beating the Raiders, which is not super surprising, but it was a good on their part to defeat them. And then they beat the number one seeded Tennessee Titans last week in what was a defensive battle. So, what do we think of what the Cincinnati Bengals have done to this point, and how they doing?
Yeah, Bengals, they're a great story because they're kind of a tale of two teams as well. Remember, they had a great run during the regular season, and you always have to be cautious when you're talking about the Bengals just because they are the Bengals. But
Yeah.
great, phenomenal winning streak in the regular season. You thought, okay, here come the Bengals as possibly the team to beat in the AFC, and then they cooled off significantly to the point where people really weren't even talking about them. And now here they are, 2 wins later, another phenomenal game. Which they kicked the game winning field goal there with no time left, which was great. So they knocked off their 1 seed on the road. So anything is of course possible. And they got a taste for it now. You can tell they are a different team than they were limping down the stretch of the regular season. They got a taste for it. Joe Burrow, speaking of elite quarterbacks, Joe Burrow has really come on. In the last 4 or 5 games of the regular season, and just gone from middling around to that elite conversation. As you know, I went to the finals of 2 of my fantasy leagues, literally on his back. One of them I won with a 5-9 record strictly because of Joe Burrow, and the other one I lost because of Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. So yeah, I mean the Bengals. These regular season records can be very, very misleading. Again, I hate to keep bringing. I don't hate up there. That's a lie. But if I had proven anything in those 2 years, is the regular season is completely pointless when you clean the slate and go to the playoffs, and the record means anything. But again, that 10-7 record obviously doesn't mean anything when you go into the 1 seed's house in January and take them down. So yeah, the Bengals are one of those teams that again, another feel good story. Like you said, probably the feel good story, however you want to look at it. But they are hungry. They got a taste for it. And this is a team that's, went from 1991 not winning a playoff game, and now they've won 2, this year. And obviously their toughest their toughest task, I think, is still ahead. I think even though were the Titans the 1 seed, or was it Kansas City? Was it the Titans?
Titans were the 1 seed. Yeah, they had the week off the week before. They had probably as healthy as he can be, understandably with the Derrick Henry, and they ended up taking him down. Ryan Tannehill, another one of those game managers, ended up having 3 interceptions in that game, and he is who we thought he was, what we thought he was, basically what I thought he was. I've never really looked highly on Ryan Tannehill from his Miami Dolphin days, but needless to say, the Bengals are here to stay. I mean, Joe Burrow's in the Matthew Stafford mold, where they're proving that the number 1 overall pick was in good use, and defense is pretty good. Number 5 rush defense in the regular season overall. So that's basically that's going to help them against their opponents, because their opponents don't have really any kind of high-ranking defense at all. They are all offense, and that's going to bring us to the Kansas City Chiefs, who beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in what was pretty much a layup as far as playoff games go. And then they beat the number 1 defense in the NFL in the Buffalo Bills. And excuse me, to highlight your point from earlier, you were saying how the Bills were how defense usually wins against the high-powered offenses, but in 13 seconds, that did not happen. The Kansas City Chiefs ended up scoring 10 points in the final 13 seconds, and they ended up tying. Well, sorry, they had they scored the tying field goal with 13 seconds to run down the field, and then they ended up winning in overtime. Every game came down to the last possession. This was the only one where the home team ended up winning, and this is the only one where a touchdown ended the game instead of the field goals. So, what do we think of the Kansas City Chiefs at this point?
I think this is definitely Cincinnati's toughest test yet. Again, even though technically Tennessee was the 1 seed, this is a Kansas City Chiefs team that is playing in their third straight AFC Championship game. This is a team that's been to the Super Bowl twice in a row. Definitely not happy after the last one. This is a Patrick Mahomes, arguably, without a doubt, top tier, but arguably the best quarterback in the league, with plenty of playoff success experience in his very still young tenured career. So I think this is definitely their toughest test. The Chiefs, people were looking to write them off in the first half of the season, but they definitely put it together. I mean, that offense is just insane with the weapons they have, but their defense got it together. They were starting to remind me of, as to cross sport here a little bit. They're starting to remind me of the mid 2000s Capitals teams that were won their division every year, were just outscoring everyone, and then went to the playoffs and were just stumped. But because they didn't have much in the way of defense. But again, the difference here is that this is a Chiefs team that's been there several times. Pretty much everyone on that team has been to at least one Super Bowl, if not two. So it's definitely the Cincinnati's toughest task yet. Not to mention, Cincinnati, you got pretty much everyone on that team walking into the conference championship game for the first time, whereas the Chiefs have been there before, and it's going to be a very, very hostile crowd. I know that Cincinnati will bring some people, but that Kansas City crowd is just insane, especially in an AFC championship setting that, again, is second nature to them by now.
Yeah.
So you should have a very entertaining day, to say the least. And again, I don't know what to make of it, in terms of predictions, because you've got, two of the best quarterbacks in the league going at it. They both have tremendous weapons. And I think Cincinnati's probably get the better defense between the two, but Kansas City's defense has definitely put it together and found a way to play better than they probably, I don't want to say should, but better than you think they would have been in the last month of the season or so. So if I had to make a prediction, I think I would not bet against Mahomes in the playoffs. I just wouldn't, especially with that home crowd at his back. So if I had to make a prediction, I'd say Kansas City, not by much. Should be a close game. I think, what I will predict? I think they're going to have a shootout. I think you're going to have easily both teams in the 20s, if not 30s. I think you'll have a close game with a lot of scoring. That's as far as I'll go with a prediction.
Yeah, it's hard to go against the experience against the inexperience, because I mean, the Bengals are coming in here with, they have, like you said, they haven't won a playoff game since 1991, and now they have two going and rolling in here. It's very hard to go against the Chiefs. The only thing is that Joe Burrow has to win this game. Joe Burrow has to pick apart the KC defense more than Patrick Mahomes could beat a better Cincinnati Bengals defense. So I'm gonna say that I'm gonna go upset here. I'm gonna say that the Bengals are gonna pull this one out. I think they have a better chance of winning this one than the 49ers do against the Rams. But the 49ers Rams is gonna be like closer, kind of maybe. Both teams maybe a little bit over 20 points, but this one over here is going to be both of them. Both of them are going to score way more than 28. But I'm going to say that the Bengals, Joe Burrow ends up being the man and ends up taking down Patrick Mahomes. That's going to be my bold prediction of the week.
Fair, okay.
All right, let's see. We'll see how that ends up shaking up on next week's show. So we're gonna switch gears now. We're gonna talk about one of the most legendary athletes in New York City history. Henrik Lundqvist is gonna have his number retired with the New York Rangers tomorrow night against the Wild, with familiar faces of Matt Zuccarello and Cam Talbot in attendance because they play for the Wild, and a whole host of other former players, I'm sure, and a whole big ceremony coming up. So, what do you think of the Henrik Lundqvist Day, and just any thoughts about him in general?
Well, I mean, there's not a Ranger fan on the planet who should not be revering and treating the guy as a god. Um, all last few seasons and contract aside, doesn't change how you feel about the man. Uh, just like pure legend, what he did for this franchise. He's been playing so long that people forget. I know that people significantly younger than us tend to forget that they didn't make the playoffs from 1997 was the last time they made the playoffs. Then from 98 until the last season before the lockout, 2004, they did not make the playoffs.
Yeah.
You lose the season for the lockout, they come back. You got a rookie goaltender named Henrik Lundqvist, and all of a sudden they were going to be a higher seed, but they did have some injuries down the stretch. Yager and Lundqvist both playing hurt, but in any case, they did make the playoffs. So they've been and they. I believe in his tenure, they made the playoffs up until 2017, which was the last time they made the playoffs in his tenure. I'm pretty sure, I want to say they made the playoffs every year but once.
Yep.
Every year but 2010, I think it was the one that came down to the shootout with the last game of the season with Philly. But, so this is a guy who, took over a very storied franchise that was just in the tank, in the crapper, and rescued them. And, the things that he did, the 2012 run, the 2014, 2015 run, these are teams that we found out later that probably overachieved because of him. They were definitely missing some pieces. That 2012 team needed some offense. And that's pretty much goes the tail of the whatever the thing is. That pretty much sums up his tenure in New York, is him standing on his head and the team not coming through with goals to support him in the big games. And so for that reason, he's got that quote unquote Dan Marino status as the best player, blah, 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 never to win a title. But in any case, this is a pure competitor. This is a gamer. This is a guy who went out every night trying to win. A goalie can't wear the C, but if he could, he would have absolutely had the C on. This is just a legendary. This is just a pure legend that the things that he did for the New York Rangers and for that building are just unbelievable. Some of the saves that he made in that 2014 run, the 2015 run, just unbelievable. And definitely well honored, well deserved to be just the 11th jersey, 11th number going up to those rafters on the Rangers side. They wasted no time. He retired last year. They did it the very next season, rightfully so. I mean, if you look at the names of some of the guys that went up to the rafters, even Richter, Messier, Leach, even though they took a couple of years after retiring, but Lundqvist the very next season, definitely no questions asked. There's not, and anybody, you could be a fan of whatever team, Devils, Islanders, you can hate the Rangers all you want, but, you have to respect greatness, when it comes, whether you love the team or it's a team you love or a team you hate. There's no questions that number should go to the rafters, and it should be a pretty exciting show tomorrow night.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited for it. I mean, we'll put the way it ended to the side because it just got really ugly at that point. But
Yes.
it was, he absolutely carried the Rangers in the beginning of his career, and I think a lot of the flack that he got at the end of his career came from the fans that were like new fans from their success in 2012 and 2014, 2015. They weren't there in the beginning of his career when he was just standing on his head. Yeah, he had one season where he had like a 1.92 goals against average for an entire season. There were many times that he went over 70 starts in a season. He owns 50 Rangers records as for a goaltender, which for a team that has been around for 100 years, like it's very impressive for one person to have like 50 records in an isolated position. The most wins, most playoff wins. I mean, you name it, he has it. It's just it's goes beyond words what he meant to the franchise and how he was able to single-handedly carry, much like the current Ranger roster is revolving around Igor Shesterkin a lot. It's a very similar to the early Hank years, and it's fantastic that the number is going up. I think a part of me is thinking that the number went up so quick because of the heart condition and like the fact that he's available now and the uncertainty that goes on with that. But the fact is that they are doing it they are doing it tomorrow night, and it is well deserved. And a lot of every New York Rangers fan is going to be cheering, celebrating, and this is different from the past couple of number retirements that have happened because what was it? It was Jean Rattel and Vic Hatfield who were playing in like the 70s and early 80s, and it was like decades before they even played. So it was like a bunch of fans that were there that didn't ever even see them play. So
Right.
now it's to the point that it's fresh in everybody's head, and it's going to be absolutely wild. It's going to be like the greatest party or greatest retirement of any recent memory. Probably back until the Fab Four went up there. But this is it's going to be an epic night, and it's going to be well deserved, and I'm extremely happy to be a part of it. At some point, I'm actually going to be working in the building, so I'll be there. I'll be there, not having to pay $500 to be there. So, yeah, he's a fantastic goaltender. It's just it's amazing.
Yeah, and this is something that as time goes on, you've got more and more newer generations of Ranger fans. Like you said, the last four numbers they put up, Bathgate, Howell, Rattel, and Hadfield, definitely legends. And in looking at their stats, because they're all before even my time, those are definitely worth it. Yeah, believe it or not, there are some guys on the team on the Raptors before my time too. Yes,
that's exactly what I was talking about. I was over there. I was sitting down for the. I ended up being lucky enough to go to the Vic Hatfield one, and I'm looking around. It's just like people weren't even interested. It was like half empty when it was going on because it was it was decades, but since he ended up playing, so it was like they didn't have those fans in attendance didn't really have that same connection with him that they are going to have for Henrik Lundqvist. That's why it's going to be no seat empty. I'm pretty sure by the time 6:30 happens and the start of this ceremony happens.
Right. So this is a guy Lundqvist who bridges all generations because everybody, no matter how young you are, he just retired. No matter how young you are, if you were 10 years old, during the 2014 finals or 2015. Now you're, coming up on the end of your teenage years. So you remember that, the Lundqvist era. So, and of course, anybody even older, obviously. So like when I first started going to Ranger games in the 80s, Rod Jobert and Eddie Jockerman were already in the Raptors. They were retired. I believe both were in the 80s. I think I'm too young. I don't remember the retirement ceremonies, but, yeah, the Fab Four, as you mentioned it. So my, era of greatness was the 94 Cup. I was a senior in high school. So when those guys retired, and yes, Richter, Messier, Leach, and Graves going to the Raptors were, that was for me. That was for me. So, and, the last four, the guys from the 70s, that was for, our parents and whatnot. But so now you have a guy who is for everyone, every generation. Everybody knows,
Oh,
you know, if you're a Ranger fan, no matter how old you are, you know, you could be 9 years old now, and just getting into Rangers hockey, but you don't really remember, you know, most of his greatness, but you know the name, you know who he was. So, you know, this should be just an amazing night tomorrow night. All Ranger fans, yeah, with the price of tickets, obviously, and you know, there won't be any empty seats tomorrow night. It's going to be like a playoff atmosphere in there, and let's hope the Rangers do better than they don't have a good record. I meant to look it up and I didn't. They don't have a good record when they were a number. I know they lost Victor and Messier night. I don't know about everyone else. I'm going to look that up in a little bit, but let's hope the Rangers put forth a little better effort than they have in the past when one of their legends goes up to the rafters.
Yeah, well, let's think about the Lundqvist factor from a marketing standpoint. I mean, this is a supermodel who was going in goalie gear, which is like the grittiest position, arguably in hockey. You know, he's putting on all these pads and everything and like that, and he's just the greatest, one of the greatest goaltender and the greatest goaltender that is dressed up in a Rangers jersey. I mean, it's just, you know, as far as the marketability and how he was above the game, much like, let's say, like a Walt Frazier or Joe Namath, you know, like these guys who were more than just athletes themselves, and, you know, were able to make a name for themselves past, you know, just their performance on the field. I mean, this is what Henrik Lundqvist was. So Henrik Lundqvist has meant so much to so many people. Has probably, with his greatness and with his you know, transcending fact that he was like a supermodel, basically grew the game in New York itself, almost single-handedly, you know, for a long period of time. And then, you know, unfortunately, toward the end of his career, when he wasn't as abominable as he was in the beginning of his career, that's when the Rangers were able to score. But, you know, just the timing didn't work out there as far as a cup goes. A lot of rival fans will say that he was, you know, he didn't get the cup and everything like that. But, you know, it's more than just, you know, this is a team sport, and it's just it was, you know, if you look at his career, and then you look at those rival fans, how many goaltenders they've actually been through in the time that Henrik Lundqvist was a New York Ranger, and, you know, Lundqvist was the man for so long, and the, you know, other franchises like the New York Islanders, I think they went through like 20 different goalies in the time that Henrik Lundqvist is a Ranger, and then there's other teams that have been through, you know, more than 10. So it's just, you know, as far as the Rangers franchise goes with goaltending, they've been really lucky for the most part, up until even now. But they were, you know, extremely fortunate to have Henrik Lundqvist and to be picked 205th in the draft overall. So there were 204 players that were drafted before he was, and, you know, for him to make the career that he did was just, it was hard work, it was dedication, it was focus, and it was just, he was able to get it done. And he's the absolute man, and he's gonna be up in the rafters forever.
Yeah, and you mentioned you know, not winning a title, and yes, I really hate that. I really hate people that put emphasis on titles in team sports.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like we said, I think, you know, I said it, and you know, I don't know if you agree or whatnot, but I think that the Rangers definitely overachieved in those 3 seasons, 12, 14, and 15, 3 conference finals appearances and one finals appearance because of Lundqvist. And, you know, and I think that, you know, it was exposed, and, you know, the teams were exposed for their flaws, which was pretty much everything but Lundqvist. And I really hate, and you only really hear that from rival teams, from rival teams fans. So Devils, Islanders, Flyers fans, you know, they'll just say, "Oh, he doesn't have any," especially Devils fans with Marty with his 3 cups and whatnot. Yes, you know, admitting that Lundqvist is a legend, it does not take away from your goalie. Like,
Yeah.
And you know, my response to that always is, "Oh, so teams, so, you know, titles means, you know." Titles in a team sport is a reflection of their greatness. Oh, okay, so Trent Dilfer is a better quarterback than Dan Marino. Oh, so I really hate that you know, argument. So yeah, it is a shame that he never got to win. And I was actually, when he got picked up by Washington, I was actually happy about that. It's a shame that he had the heart problem. Like they always say, human beings first, athletes second. So it was a shame altogether. But having said that, and from the playing standpoint, I said, okay, well, here's a Caps team that is just off, just a year or two off winning the Stanley Cup and is still obviously in contender mode. I was very happy. I had no problem rooting for, because we knew in those years that the Rangers were not going to be a contender, so that wouldn't be an issue. I had no problem rooting for division rival, the Washington Capitals, to win the Stanley Cup. If he probably wouldn't have been the number one guy, but he would have, gotten some playing time in there in the playoffs and the finals, I'm sure, and more importantly, would have lifted that thing up at the end. So it is a shame what happened, and hopefully, his health problems are behind him because, again, that's top priority. But, I got excited. I thought maybe he would get one more shot at it, kind of like the Ray Bourque situation in 2001, but wasn't meant to be. In the meantime, it is what it is, and we have tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the subsequent Tom Wilson situation later on in the season pretty much killed all of that as far as the whole brief, harmonious Rangers Capitals alliance that was building there. Well, I think I'd say that Henrik Lundqvist is really I'd say he just, I don't know. It's kind of hard to put everything into words of what he meant for the New York Rangers franchise, but he basically put him on the map. I think before he got there, they were just meddling, and they were just a whole bunch of they bring in like these future Hall of Famers and the end of their careers, and they weren't meshing, and it was just a whole ton of money just getting spent and not doing anything about it. But he was a part of the solution, and part of the solution that ended up making the Rangers elite again, and making them, first he put them into relevancy, and then he ended up putting them into the elite status for a while. And I think if you put Henrik Lundqvist, since he was drafted so far in the draft, every team had a crack at him. I mean, if you put him on Pittsburgh for all of this time, or at least maybe the first 10 years of his career, then he's basically like, they're winning like double the amount of cups. They'd have like 6 cups now instead of the 3 that they ended up having in that span. If you put them on, any other team, maybe you put them on San Jose, because San Jose had so many great teams forward-wise, and complete teams except goaltending. And if you put them on the Sharks, maybe they definitely have 1 at this point. Instead of having 0 for their franchise. So I mean, you look at all the relative status, and that's why as far as cups go, it doesn't really tell the whole story. But there's one fact, and that Henrik Lundqvist was super dominant, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And tomorrow's going to be an electric night of celebrating in Madison Square Garden.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we all deserve this as far as the fans go. That's for sure.
We do deserve this because we've, the last 3-4 years, have been some dark ages. And again, we're both old enough to remember that at 98 to 05, the Great Depression, as I like to call it. So the difference is it was a pre-salary cap era, and they were spending, like you said, they were putting a bunch of, superstars on the tail ends of their careers, just throwing money at them, and they did not find a way to mesh. This one, we kind of knew it was coming, and we just had to grin and bear it and suck it up. And now it's just, we're happy again. This is, they haven't even reached where we know that they're going to be. I mean, they've still got, growing to do, and look where we are. And on top of how it's so, I think they're exceeding expectations from where we thought they'd be. I think at the beginning of the season, we thought they'd be a low-level playoff team. Now they're competing for the President's Trophy. So, so on top of all that, we've got Henrik Lundqvist night tomorrow night. So, good time once again. Once again, it is a good time to be a Ranger fan.
Oh, yeah. So, all right. So that ends our show for this week. Thank you very much, Scott, for stopping by again.
Thank you for having me, sir. Pleasure as always.
My name is Alfonso Caldera. We'll be back next week.